So it sounds like you've worked very closely on insurance issues in Louisiana. Obviously, the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina had to have been one of the most significant events dealing with insurance in the state. Can you kind of address how you dealt with that through your regulatory perspective?
Surely, I actually, and when the hurricane came through our state, and what's incredible about it today is Katrina held the record for the most expensive hurricane loss, insured loss event until Ian hit Naples, Florida last year and doubled the paid losses from Katrina 15 years earlier. But for those 15 years, the most expensive of all time was Katrina, and Katrina combined with Rita 3 weeks later that hit the southwest corner of our state, cost insurers across 1 million claims that were filed for wind damage, not counting the flood losses of $16 billion for flood insured property. Those million claims resulted in $26 billion being paid, 23 billion for Katrina, 3 billion for Rita 3 weeks later, by insurers for the devastation caused by Katrina. But Katrina was only a category 3. And 2.5 years ago, Laura came into Lake Charles with with 150 mile an hour hurricane winds, almost a category 5. And a year and a day later, Hurricane Ida made landfall at Port Fourchon, the center of our coast along the Gulf, again with 150 mile an hour winds, both of them much more powerful than Katrina and Rita, both category 3 storms. But again, 800,000 more claims with payments totaling 2014 and $23 billion of wind damage for those two hurricanes. Fortuitously, they were both relatively dry hurricanes in that there was very little associated rainfall or even storm surge that came ashore to flood properties like Katrina and Rita had generated 15 years earlier. So the first thing my predecessor and I, as his chief deputy, did after Katrina was call an emergency meeting, if you will, of all the insurance industry at the Airport Hilton in Atlanta. People couldn't get to Baton Rouge and New Orleans. We were completely shut down with National Guard troops from all over America guarding the interstates and the ingress and egress streets and highways in and out of New Orleans in particular. It was underwater. In fact, we had lost 1,500 of our fellow citizens primarily to drowning in their homes and trying to escape the floodwaters. But at that emergency meeting, somewhere between 400 and 500 insurance executives flew in together with our colleague from the state of Florida, Kevin McCarthy at the time, who joined us as well to share with us his experience from the year before Katrina, when 4 major hurricanes made landfall in the state of Florida in one hurricane season. 3 of them, the eye wall passed over Orlando as it made its way across, 2 from the Gulf side, from the ocean side, 1 from the Gulf side, but all 3 of them crisscrossing over Orlando. He shared with us a package of emergency rules that he put in place that, frankly, we took back here to Baton Rouge, copied and implemented. We worked closely with then Governor Blanco to call a special session and make improvements and reforms in our system, such as the first ever statewide building code that still today gets rave reviews for our creation of it and our maintenance of the international building code standards that are required to be updated every 3 years to maintain the certification of a top quality building code. Helps our market a great deal, as vulnerable and as often as we're hit with hurricane events. We licensed for the first time claims adjusters. We we created the first version of the incentive program to attract insurers to our marketplace. And those things are still helping us as we recover periodically from hurricane events here in Louisiana.
I'm sure the people of Louisiana are very grateful for your work there. We've discussed a lot of the work that you've done specific to Louisiana. You, of course, also impacted public policy nationally. You served as president of the NAIC in 2013. How do you feel that it was important to engage with regulators from all across the country and bring that back to Louisiana?
Well, it's vital. It's essential. The state-based system has been around since the 19th century, and it was enshrined with its power by McCarran Ferguson in the 1940s. And having a body like the NAIC that brings all the various regulators together periodically to adopt model laws and best practices for things that don't fit in a model law scenario, they're essential for us to be able to keep the insurance business regulated on the state level. During that year when I was president, the president, Barack Obama, called the then CEO, my dear friend Ben Nelson, who I had hired to fill the vacancy in the CEO position at the beginning of 2013, and who had served with President Obama in the state Senate as a fellow Democrat and close ally before choosing not to run again and becoming the CEO of the NAIC. Senator Nelson got a call on a Friday from President Obama asking him to ask me to bring colleagues, relevant, specialized colleagues with me to a meeting with him the next week relative to the Affordable Care Act, his pride and joy piece of legislation. I did, and during that meeting, when we were discussing the Affordable Care Act, which the president had detailed knowledge and familiarity with that 1,000-page piece of legislation, he made the observation that as a state senator, as a United States senator, and then as president, he had always been firmly committed and supportive of state-based regulation of insurance. And I responded to him that I was thrilled to hear that, but I wasn't surprised, because across party lines, Democrats, Republicans, consumer reps, and business representatives all agree that insurance is best regulated on behalf of policyholders at the state level, where you can pick up the phone and reach the regulator. With federal insurance, whether it's Medicare, flood insurance, you name it, the issues that present themselves and consumers are confronted with, you can't talk to the decision maker at the top. It's just impossible. We have as good a relationship, I think, as any state, certainly with our delegation, but I think with the federal bureaucracy at large. And at best, we have a designee who we have communication with on an ongoing basis with issues that our consumers, our citizens are confronted by. So that opportunity that year to serve the NAIC and interact with the president and the Treasury and other agency heads on behalf of insurance regulation at the state level was a great opportunity. When we finished his issue about the Affordable Care Act, he asked me if I had anything that I wanted to talk about, and I said, yes, sir, and it's international. And he said, oh, really? And we were in the throes back then of competing with the EU for which system, our risk-based capital system or their bank-centric mechanism for regulating banks and insurance, which in Europe is always combined, the banks and the regulator does banks and insurance. And so Treasury only does banks, not insurance. And so they were always negotiating away our best interest in the insurance world as we were trying at the IAIS, the International Association of Insurance Supervisors, to have our system picked or at least labeled equivalent to their system so that we could compete in emerging markets like India, like China, like Central and South America on an even basis. Not our companies wouldn't have to keep one set of books for their stateside regulator and a different set of books for their international regulator. And so ultimately, we were successful in doing that during the Trump administration through the leadership at the NAIC at that time. I was long out of office by the time that issue was resolved, but we took that fight. I had a wingman, I called him, Tom Leonardi from Connecticut, that traveled the world, truthfully, advocating for our system and debating and pushing back at the IAIS with the Europeans, with, I dare say, no support from Treasury. In fact, we were confronted by their close relationship with the bank regulators over in Europe and had to overcome that ultimately, which we did.
Interesting. So the NAIC and NCOIL can definitely agree on the importance of state-based regulation of insurance. Can you tell us how you first heard about NCOIL and kind of got involved?
Yes, it was while I was chair of the insurance committee during my time in the legislature. I would say in the late 90s, I had a colleague also from Jefferson Parish, Representative Shirley Bowler, who is widely known and remembered fondly by NCOIL people who are still there going back as far as the 90s. She was a zealot on behalf of NCOIL. In fact, I accompanied her to Chicago for the first NCOIL meeting I ever attended. And then later, when I became commissioner and she was term limited out of the legislature in Louisiana, hired her as one of my deputy commissioners. And she continued to interact with NCOIL, that she was really, really an invaluable part of their works at that time, and a really helpful to me as first as chair of the insurance committee and then as commissioner in utilizing NCOIL in advocating for my philosophy and hers, which mirrors very closely that of the majority membership at NCOIL.
That's great. How would you describe your overall experience throughout your involvement with the organization?
Oh, it's been very, very integral in my role as a legislator and now as a regulator, and in particular as a chair of the as president of the NAIC. When I was president, your now CEO, Tom Considine, was my colleague and the commissioner in New Jersey, and actually was a close ally of mine in the internal politics to the NAIC. We worked very closely together, and we were both fighting some issues in our state's regulatory history that we were able and were proud to trumpet. We had turned around and improved our market from a private company's perspective, making it much more user-friendly for companies wanting to do business in our respective states. And we were very supportive of each other's efforts at the NAIC as colleagues and fellow commissioners. When he took the CEO position at NCOIL, I was very happy to see that, because frankly, there had been some tension between the NAIC and NCOIL. Ever since Tom went over to NCOIL, it has been on a gradual and improving noticeably relationship. As you know, I was just at the meeting in Columbus, and I think I was joined by 5 others of my colleagues. Sharon Clark of Kentucky, Beth Dwyer of Rhode Island, Glenn Moretti of Oklahoma, myself, and someone had to cancel at the last minute and not able to get there with us. But yes, and that's a typical representation from us to NCOIL meetings, national meetings, and NCOIL reciprocates and sends a delegation to our meetings, our national meetings, like the one that will start next week in Orlando.
It's definitely been great to see that relationship evolve and change and grow. So we love to see that, and we've been very happy to have a strong delegation of commissioners at our meetings. Are there any issues you'd like to see NCOIL take on in the years ahead?
Yes, I would urge them to continue. One of the biggest challenges I've had over the past, I'd say 10 years, has been the emergence of PBMs in the health insurance arena. And several of the NCOIL leaders have been engaged in that issue and regulation challenges as well. And we just succeeded in reining in some activity for on behalf of independent pharmacists dealing with PBMs and their billing practices that resulted in significant fines that I had to order PBMs to pay. But the other states that have been most active on behalf of consumers and pharmacists are also active at NCOIL on the issue, and those include Arkansas and Oklahoma and West Virginia. And I would like to thank myself as well and my colleagues in the Louisiana legislature. In addition to that, as an emerging concern to the industry and to members of NCOIL, you have a doctor member from East Texas I met with in Columbus last week, focusing on the SBO issue and the fear that it's trying to grow itself into a standard maker or a competitor for the AM Best of the world and the Standard & Poor's as a overseer of insurance regulation with their rating system. And that's not what the NAIC is about. And I was pleased to see that we were given an opportunity to dispel, hopefully, those concerns during the dialogue between myself and my colleagues and the leadership of NCOIL last week. But that's an issue where there's concern on one side, and we are here in the national meetings to answer those concerns and hopefully put them to rest. Short-term, limited duration health insurance that's been banned or almost regulated out of existence back in the Obama years, resurrected during Trump, and now under attack again at the federal level, but defended, I dare say, across party lines for the most part at the NAIC and certainly at NCOIL, and we can work together on that as well to preserve that minimum coverage that many hardworking, if you will, working poor need as the minimum health coverage that they can afford, frankly. And so those are a couple of examples of areas of mutual interest. The international issues that I touched on before, NCOIL has been extremely supportive in those efforts as well.
Interesting. So obviously the NAIC is a regulatory body as opposed to a legislative one. So I'm just wondering, have you seen partisanship arise there as we've seen in legislative organizations, particularly on the federal level?
Yes, but not as bad. we've always been, we self-describe as a standard-setting organization, which is a public role. We vote on model laws, and there's always some opposition to what we're proposing go into effect as a model law, sometimes backed by the accreditation program to give real teeth to the effort to make that model law become uniform across the nation. So it's political, and therefore it does become partisan. But I would dare say that it's not nearly as partisan as what you see in Congress, and frankly, not as partisan as what has emerged over the past several years at my state level. And I dare say other states as well, with very few exceptions. So NAIC is political, so therefore it's subject to partisanship. But the mindset, the philosophy of the NAIC is we strive and virtually always achieve consensus. That meaning whatever we come to conclude and get behind is supported by all sides. And so that of itself diminishes the partisanship, because you're not voting on a set of amendments on everything and tending to vote along party lines, yay or nay. The whole effort is aimed toward achieving consensus, because it helps greatly if you can achieve consensus in getting support at the various state levels, from red states to blue states, for implementation of what we are working toward.
It's very insightful. So before we let you go, we have a quick lightning round of questions to help our members get to know you any better. These are the real hard-hitting ones. Can you tell us your favorite all-time movie?
The Sting,
Okay.
Paul
Favorite?
Newman, and the good-looking guy, the blonde. He's up in Montana now. He's was a heartthrob, but he was the sidekick to Newman in The Sting, with a great theme song as well. But a close second is the Jag movie. We JAG officers refer to it as the Top Gun of JAG movies, and that's A Few Good Men, starring Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson, who I tell folks is my favorite actor, but then again, he's never acted a day in his life. He is crazy. And so,
Favorite all-time food?
crawfish etouffee, come on down. It's great.
Very Louisiana answer. I'll give that one to you. Favorite all-time book or author?
A New Orleans native, no kidding, is my favorite author. His name is Michael Lewis, and the first book and movie adaptation of it was Moneyball, and one of his most recent was the story of the 2008 collapse, and it was The Big Short, also a movie made from it, which my wife went with me to see The Big Short, and she's a pharmacist, clueless on regulation of insurance and securities and banks and all that. But when we got through with that movie and went back home, she has her iPad out searching SEC and regulation and all that. She was into it for a couple days there, but she got over that. She got cured.
That's a great answer. All right, a song or musical artist?
Emmylou Harris. I'm a big fan.
TV show?
Good question. I'm going to show my age now and say The Lone Ranger. I still go to antique shows on cable when I see he and Tonto riding on that beautiful white stallion that the Lone Ranger had.
Nice. And then the last one, 3 dinner party guests, living or dead?
Wow. Not to get too heavy, but Jesus Christ, Dwight Eisenhower, and one you never heard of, Johnny Padres. And he was a rookie left-hander who pitched the seventh game of the 1955 World Series for the Brooklyn Dodgers and won a 2-0 shutout and was the only world championship that the Bums from Brooklyn won in their entire time in Brooklyn, from the 19th century to a couple years after that world championship when they moved to LA.
All very interesting answers. So this wraps up this month's NCOIL one-on-one interview with Louisiana Commissioner Jim Donelon. Commissioner Donelon, thank you so much for your service, Louisiana nationally, and thank you so much for being a part of this interview.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.